Ashton Jeanty just gave a surprising update on the injury that had the entire Raiders team worried. When it first happened, he couldn't put any weight on his leg. Trainers had to carry him off, and his teammates immediately dropped to their knees. But apparently, the injury isn't what everyone feared. Let's get into it. Sunday afternoon at the Intermountain Health Performance Center in Henderson, Nevada was supposed to be routine. Training camp, team period, music playing over the speakers. Then Ashton Jeanty went down, and within seconds, the entire complex changed. During the team period, Jeanty ran a route and dove for the football, which was thrown low by veteran quarterback Kirk Cousins. Jeanty landed awkwardly on the turf grass inside the practice facility and stayed on the ground before being helped off the field by athletic trainers. Some reports on the ground described it slightly differently. On a play that saw Jeanty running a route, he dove for the pass, trying to catch the ball, and somehow he and cornerback Darian Porter collided. Either way, what mattered next was the same for everyone watching as he was being helped off. Jeanty couldn't put pressure on his right leg. What happened in the seconds after is the part people can't stop talking about. The team shut off the music playing at training camp. Everyone went quiet. Players began to kneel and say a prayer over the second-year running back. This wasn't a coach clapping his hands to get guys moving on. This was silence. His teammates immediately froze as he lay on the ground. Trainers tended to him, then helped him up and aided him off the field. As he left, the entire team got down on a knee and stayed silent for a while before finishing practice. Reporters on site described the mood in blunt terms. The trainers came out and helped Jeanty off the field. Everyone was so silent and looked worried. They helped him off in a way that was more like carrying him, as he couldn't put any weight on his right leg. That image spread within minutes. Adam Schefter posted it to his followers almost immediately, framing it exactly the way it looked on the field. The Raiders running back left practice early after suffering an apparent knee injury, diving for a catch and landing awkwardly, then being helped off the field by trainers and unable to put any pressure on his right leg. Underdog NFL's feed carried a similar version from the ground, citing the collision angle with a teammate mid-route. For a franchise that had just spent an entire offseason building around one running back, that scene was the nightmare version of Sunday. This wasn't a guy limping off holding his hamstring. This was a guy who could not put weight on his leg in front of teammates who reacted like they were watching something serious happen in real time. The Raiders didn't say a word. The team did not provide further details on the severity of Jeanty's injury. The Raiders did not provide a statement on Jeanty's status, and there was no indication of when an update would come. Head coach Clint Kubiak wasn't walking out to a podium to clear the air either. Kubiak was not scheduled to speak with reporters until Tuesday. That left a full news cycle of nothing but speculation, a silent locker room, and a young star being carried off turf. Reporters immediately shifted to who would replace him if the worst was true. Rookie running back Mike Washington Jr. took the rest of the first-team reps for the remainder of practice. Washington, who has had a strong training camp, was alternating starting reps with Jeanty before the injury. That detail alone told you how quickly the machine of an NFL roster moves on, even while the guy at the center of it is still being looked at by trainers in the tunnel. But here's the thing about a scene like that. A scary visual doesn't always match the outcome. And what came next, hours later, flipped the entire story on its head. To understand why an entire practice facility went silent over one running back going down, you have to understand what Ashton Jeanty means to this franchise. And it starts long before he ever put on a Raiders uniform. Jeanty was rated by NFL Network's Daniel Jeremiah as a top overall prospect behind Penn State edge rusher Abdul Carter and Colorado two-way star Travis Hunter. The Heisman Trophy winner heading into the 2025 draft, that ranking wasn't hype for hype's sake. At Boise State, Jeanty put together one of the best running back seasons in college football history as a junior, with 2,601 yards and 29 touchdowns on 374 carries, leading the country in all three categories en route to a second-place finish in the Heisman Trophy voting. His single-season total ranks second on the FBS all-time single-season rushing list, trailing only Barry Sanders' 2,628 yards during the 1988 season. Over his full college career, he put up 750 carries for 4,769 yards and 50 touchdowns, adding 80 catches for 862 yards and 6 touchdowns. That production made him a lock for the top of the draft, and the Raiders didn't hesitate. Las Vegas took him at number 6 overall in the 2025 NFL Draft, betting that a back who dominated at that level in college could immediately become the identity of a rebuilding offense. He didn't disappoint as a rookie, even while carrying a heavier burden than most first-year backs ever face. Jeanty had 1,321 scrimmage yards, including 975 rushing and 10 scrimmage touchdowns, split 5 apiece rushing and receiving during his rookie season. He also started every single game he played, logging 266 carries for 975 yards and 5 touchdowns across all 17 games as a rookie, while adding 55 receptions for 346 yards and 5 more scores through the air. Those aren't modest numbers for a rookie thrown into a run-heavy role behind an offensive line that was by most accounts one of the worst in the league. That last part matters. The Raiders were one of the worst run teams in the league last year, and Jeanty was hit behind the line of scrimmage more than any other running back in the league. He put up nearly 1,000 rushing yards behind a line that gave him almost nothing to work with. That's the context that turned him from just another top pick into a guy Raiders fans genuinely believe in. He produced in spite of his supporting cast, not because of it. So this offseason, Las Vegas rebuilt around him. New head coach Clint Kubiak installed an outside zone scheme, and everything about camp pointed toward Jeanty taking a leap. Beat reporters covering the team described him as looking completely at home in it. Jeanty has looked extremely comfortable in this outside zone scheme, has had multiple explosive runs down the sidelines during practice, and Kubiak wanted him to be a bell cow running back. The line had been retooled specifically to stop the punishment he took as a rookie. Every plan the Raiders had for 2026 ran through him. That's exactly why the scene on Sunday hit as hard as it did. This wasn't a committee back going down. This was the single player the entire offensive infrastructure had just been rebuilt around. Laid out on the turf, unable to walk off on his own power 3 weeks before the season opener. The Las Vegas Raiders had been relatively unscathed through training camp and the preseason this summer. Yet, exactly 3 weeks before they start the regular season, the team may have been delivered a major blow. It's also worth remembering that Jeanty had already been through a scare like this once before, back at Boise State. During his Heisman contending season, he suffered a left leg injury during the third quarter of a win over Wyoming, and there were real questions about whether he'd play the following week. The injury seemed serious initially, but he appeared to have avoided serious damage, as he was not listed on the injury report before that next game. That history didn't erase Sunday's fear, but for people who'd followed him closely, it planted a small seed of hope that this could follow a similar path, serious in the moment, survivable in the end. Now, the question was whether Las Vegas would get that same outcome or whether this one was different. What made Sunday night unbearable for Raiders fans wasn't just the injury, it was the silence that followed it. No MRI results, no press conference, no statement from the team. Just a locked door and a growing pile of educated guesses from every corner of football media. Fantasy analysts didn't sugarcoat where their minds went. One widely chased breakdown put it directly, saying Ashton Jeanty went down at Las Vegas Raiders practice on Sunday and could not put any weight on his leg. And what happened next told you more than any official statement was going to. Nobody had put a name to the injury yet, but the fear was clear. That same piece went further, laying out the worst case scenario in plain language. If a guess had to be made, this was most likely a torn ACL or something akin to that. And the expectation should be that Jeanty was done for the season. That kind of talk spread fast, and it wasn't limited to one outlet. Another fantasy football breakdown opened with almost the exact same dread, noting this is the kind of scene that makes an entire stadium go quiet. Ashton Jeanty was helped off the Raiders practice field on Sunday without putting any weight on his right leg, and by all accounts it looked serious in the moment. The same piece pointed out something that stuck with a lot of people watching the reaction from the sideline. His teammates froze as he hit the ground. Trainers rushed out, and once he was helped off the field, the entire team took a knee together and stayed silent before finishing practice. That's not a reaction you see for a tweaked ankle. That single observation became the center of the entire debate online. If it was minor, why did an entire NFL roster stop practice and pray? Fans dissected every camera angle, every account, every crumb of information, trying to reverse engineer a diagnosis out of body language alone. Meanwhile, the Raiders' running back room got measured up for what life without Jeanty might look like. The name that kept surfacing was Mike Washington Jr., the team's 4th-round pick out of Arkansas. He'd already been building momentum through camp, and his preseason tape gave the coaching staff real reason for confidence if they needed him. In his first NFL preseason action against the Arizona Cardinals, Washington ran 6 times for 63 yards, including a 53-yard run, and proved he could be utilized in pass protection and as a weapon in the passing game. He followed that up with another strong performance against the Houston Texans, running 9 times for 56 yards and adding 2 catches for 18 yards. That's a rookie who looked ready to be handed a much bigger workload than anyone expected in August. Beyond Washington, the depth chart wasn't empty either. If Jeanty were to miss any time, the team would turn to 4th-round rookie Mike Washington Jr., Dylan Laube, undrafted rookie Roman Hemby, and Dare Ogunbowale in his stead. One breakdown noted that outside of Washington, the room includes Dylan Laube, Roman Hemby, and Chris Collier. But none of those 3 profile as real bell cow replacements. Laube had carved out a role as a special teams and change of pace piece, while Hemby and Collier were camp body depth at this stage. In other words, Washington, and only Washington, was the real answer if Jeanty was out for any real length of time. That's what made the stakes so high heading into Sunday night. This wasn't a situation where the Raiders had 5 interchangeable backs and could shrug off a long-term loss. Their entire offensive identity for 2026 had one name attached to it, and one very shaky backup plan behind him if that name went down for months instead of days. Every outlet covering the story kept circling back to the same disclaimer, because nobody actually had confirmation of anything. The important distinction was that Las Vegas had not announced an official diagnosis, calling it a knee injury, projecting a timetable, or speculating about structural damage would go beyond what the Raiders had confirmed. One biography piece covering the story in real time put it just as carefully. The Raiders had not issued an official diagnosis, MRI result, or timeline as of that writing, and any claim about the exact injury type or how many games he might miss should be treated as speculation until the team or Jeanty himself confirmed it. That was the entire afternoon and evening. Speculation stacked on speculation, a team gone quiet, and a fan base bracing for the kind of news that ends a season before it starts. Then, late Sunday night, the silence broke. Hours after the scene that had an entire team on its knees, word finally came back, and it wasn't the news anyone had been bracing for. ESPN's Adam Schefter, the same reporter who'd first put the scary visual out to the world, was also the one to close the loop. Despite the scary injury at practice Sunday, Jeanty had reportedly been diagnosed with a sprained ankle, not considered a long-term injury, although the timetable was not yet known. That single update flipped the entire tone of the story. A day that had opened with fans openly discussing a season-ending knee injury ended with a diagnosis that, while still unresolved in terms of exact recovery time, ruled out the worst outcomes people had spent hours preparing for. One outlet framed the shift bluntly, calling it a big medical win for the Raiders with the latest update on their running back. The same report walked through exactly how far the fear had traveled before the correction landed. The Raiders' running back appeared to suffer a serious injury during Sunday's practice. Unable to put any weight on his right leg after making a diving play on a low throw from quarterback Kirk Cousins, and had to be assisted off the field by medical staff as his teammates, fearing the worst, all took a knee and said a prayer in solidarity. Then came the turn. Schefter eased Raiders fans' worries with his follow-up report late Sunday night. Per Schefter, Jeanty was only diagnosed with a sprained ankle, and while the Raiders remained unsure about his return timetable, the issue was not considered a long-term injury. Another outlet's follow-up added a small dose of caution on top of the relief, noting that same detail was the closest thing to certainty anyone had. An ankle sprain, timeline still unclear, but not the structural damage everyone feared. That distinction matters enormously in a league where sprained ankle and torn ACL sit on completely opposite ends of a career-altering spectrum. A torn ACL, the injury multiple analysts had openly guessed at hours earlier, typically ends a season entirely and can require 9 to 12 months of recovery before a player is anywhere close to game speed again. A sprained ankle, even a significant one, can range anywhere from a missed week to a few missed games. Serious, but recoverable inside the same season it happens. For a Raiders team that had rebuilt its entire offensive line and installed a brand new scheme specifically to feature Jeanty as a bell cow back, that difference is the difference between a shaken opening month and a lost year. The favorable diagnosis may have spared the Raiders from having a potentially all-time terrible run offense this coming season. It's worth sitting with how fast that emotional swing happened. Within the same 24-hour window, the story went from a team praying over a player who couldn't stand, to fantasy analysts calling for the worst, to reporters openly discussing depth chart replacements, and then before midnight to a diagnosis that let everyone exhale. That's not a small twist. That's the kind of update that changes an entire season's outlook in the space of a single tweet. Still, not considered a long-term injury is not the same as he'll be full go tomorrow. The Raiders hadn't put a number of missed practices or games on it. Nobody had said whether Jeanty would be ready for Kubiak's regular season debut, or whether he'd need real time on the shelf before that outside zone scheme got to feature him the way it was designed to. The relief was real, but the waiting wasn't fully over. With the sprained ankle diagnosis out, the story shifted from panic to patience. The Raiders now had to figure out exactly how much time their franchise back would actually miss, and how the rest of camp would unfold around that uncertainty. Kubiak's first real chance to speak on it publicly wasn't going to come immediately. The Raiders had not yet provided a statement on Jeanty's injury, and head coach Clint Kubiak was not scheduled to speak with reporters until Tuesday. That meant the entire fan base had to sit through another full news cycle without hearing directly from the man calling the shots on Jeanty's workload, even with the ankle diagnosis already out in the world. In the meantime, the ripple effects on the running back room didn't disappear just because the diagnosis wasn't as bad as feared. Even a short absence changes how camp reps get distributed 3 weeks before the opener, and Mike Washington Jr. had already proven over 2 preseason games that he wasn't going to waste any opportunity he got. His camp performance had drawn real praise even before Sunday. The rookie had totaled 119 yards in 2 preseason games, and McFadden noted he has shown that he could be a major factor. That kind of build-up meant the Raiders weren't walking into a crisis if Jeanty needed a handful of days on the sideline. They had a plan, and it had already shown flashes of working. There's also a piece of this story that's easy to miss in all the noise around Sunday. Jeanty has been here before in a smaller way and bounced back without missing a beat. During his rookie year, he dealt with an in-season ankle issue that carried its own scare before fading into a footnote. Coach Pete Carroll said at the time that Jeanty suffered an ankle injury in the fourth quarter of a loss to the Browns, but it wasn't believed to be severe. And when reporters pressed on whether it might limit him, Carroll's answer was measured, "I haven't heard that it would yet. It sounds like there's a chance that he'll be okay." That injury barely slowed him down. Within days, he was back at full practice, telling reporters directly, "I feel good overall." And by that Sunday, he wasn't even listed on the injury report anymore, working without restrictions ahead of a showdown against the Chargers. That track record matters here. This is a player who has already shown, in the middle of a real NFL season, that an ankle injury doesn't have to become a lost month. It can become a missed practice or two, a cautious week, and then a return to form. Whether this new sprain follows that same short path is still unconfirmed. The Raiders themselves said as much, admitting they remained unsure of the exact timetable even after ruling out anything structural. What's not in question anymore is the shape of the injury itself. What started as a scene serious enough to stop an entire practice cold, serious enough to put every fantasy manager and beat reporter in the sport on alert, serious enough for teammates to drop to a knee in silence, turned out to be an ankle sprain, not a structural tear, not a season-ending diagnosis, not the nightmare version of the story. For a Raiders team that spent an entire offseason building a run game specifically around one player, that update was as close to a best-case outcome as Sunday night could have delivered. The line had been retooled, the scheme had been installed, the bell cow role had been handed to him before a single regular season snap had been played. Losing him to something catastrophic 3 weeks out would have unraveled all of it in a single afternoon. Instead, the Raiders head into the final stretch of camp with a banged-up starter, a rookie who's already shown he can carry real snaps if called on, and a diagnosis that keeps the season's biggest plan intact. Jeanty's own next update, whether he's back on the practice field this week, whether Kubiak gives a firm timetable on Tuesday, whether the ankle holds up under live reps again, is the piece still left to unfold. But the scariest version of Sunday's story, the one that had an entire locker room praying in silence, is not the one that turned out to be true.